Welcome to our Good Schools Guide discussion forum. I'm Grace Moody-Stuart. I run the consultancy at the Good Schools Guide. And today we're going to be talking about educating boys and the challenges faced by boys in the current climate. Who better to discuss this with than our excellent panel? And I'm delighted to introduce you to Clarke on my left, who's the head of St James's Senior School, which is an all-boys school. Rick will tell us a little bit more about the school in a minute. And Gill, who's the Director of Admissions at St Paul's School. I'd like first, if I may, to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about your respective schools. Broadly, how many boys there are in the school, the ethos, culture of the school, and anything you think stands out about your particular school and its identity. So perhaps I could start with, okay, Caroline, you go.
I'll go first. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So St Paul's School is an academically selective school. It goes from 7 to 18. There's all through. So our junior school goes from 7 to 13, and then the senior school from 13 to 18, and it's an all-through school. I would say that, so in terms of numbers, the entire site has 1,500, with about 1,000 of those being at the senior school and 500 at our junior school. I would say in terms of ethos, obviously we are academically selective, so I think scholarship, a passion for learning, a love for learning, those are the kind of boys that we're looking for, but also a huge emphasis on the co-curricular. So one of our kind of USPs is that we have what we call our 100-minute lunchtime, because we know boys are coming from all around London. We really encourage them to do their co-curricular during the lunchtime. And then obviously, like all schools nowadays, really embedding values as well, which I think is important for everyone.
Thank you, Caroline. And Rick?
Morning, everyone. So I'm Rick Clarke, the head of St James Senior Boys. We're in Ashford in Surrey, and we were founded 50 years ago in central London. We have a girls' school and a prep school, which is co-ed, still in central London in Kensington. The boys' school moved out over time, first to Twickenham and then to Ashford, because we needed more space. And particularly for boys, we wanted to have facilities that they could use. So we have a fairly extensive site now. I think one of the massive benefits of being certainly in London and in the UK is that the range of schools that are available for parents and finding the right school. And it's fantastic to share the stage with St Paul's, who offer a wonderful opportunity for boys, clearly, who are gearing towards an academic curriculum. We do the same, but we are broad ability, and so we pride ourselves on a holistic education. We also do things a little bit differently at St James. We were founded 50 years ago. Our founder wanted to find a different way of educating, and meditation and mindfulness are part of what we're about. So we teach the boys how to use stillness and the power of attention to manage the various challenges they have as they go through their teenage years. Mixed in with that, there's a huge amount of focus on outdoor education, the sport, the music, the drama, extensive opportunities to do that, to go on trips, because we really do believe that holistic education is what the boys need to help them become young men of character.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Caroline. So moving on to our rather, I wouldn't say new, it's a sort of age-old topic about single-sex versus co-ed and what the pros and cons are. But just to give you a bit of context, there are 2,500 independent schools. 92 of these are single-sex boys' schools, and 139 of these are girls' schools. So single-sex schools are only 17% of the total independent schools in the country. As we all know, vast majority of state schools are also co-ed, although there are some single-sex. And it's arguable that single-sex education is one of the various choices you are given if you're buying into an independent education. So perhaps I could start by asking Rick, what kind of child would not flourish in a single-sex boys' school?
That's an interesting question, because, and I think you're returning to your original point about the small number of single-sex schools. I think it's fantastic that there is choice available for parents, because all children are different and will flourish in different environments. It is often difficult to say which kind of boy would not flourish, because I have seen, certainly in the short time I've been at St James, but talking to the staff about the kinds of boys who've been through and flourished, that we cater for a wide range of boys. I would expect that obviously if a boy would prefer to be in an environment where he is mixing with girls, that would suit him better. But we find, because of the natural links we have with our girls' school and with other girls' schools, that there are plenty of opportunities for social interaction and other academic interactions to happen, and that boys can then flourish in their own environment together with other boys. So it's difficult to say that if there's a particular kind of boy that wouldn't flourish. I think it really is a particular individual who may flourish in either kind of school, if that makes sense.
And before I go on to Caroline, Rick, can you tell me, have you ever taught in an all-girls school?
I haven't taught all girls. I've taught co-ed. I went to an all-boys school. I was educated in South Africa, as you might tell from my accent, and then have taught at single-sex schools and co-ed. So I've had a range of opportunities teaching across both. And
what would you say the difference was in your experience of those two environments?
It's a good question. I mean, in the end, we've got children who are flourishing in different ways. So I think that, you know, I've loved doing both. I think what I have seen work really well at St James is the ability to work with boys on some tricky things, and some of which we may discuss later on, and lots of which has come up recently in the press and the media about the emotional life of young boys. We are able to do that in a really powerful, meaningful way, and let the boys talk openly. And I think there's been a shift in society which is important, and there's still lots of work to be done on this, on helping boys tap into their emotional selves and be able to talk about that comfortably with role models, both male and female. And I think that's what I like too, and I know that St Paul's will be the same, to have strong, powerful, influential role models who are both male and female to help guide them through those challenging times.
That's very interesting. Can we move on straight to that, Caroline? Do you think that happens at St Paul's? People are able to talk openly about their emotions, and what makes that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree with everything that Rick's just said here. I think I actually talked before coming to this event to people like our head of art, head of drama, and just to gauge opinions. And actually the recurring theme was it gives the boys freedom. Freedom was the word that I kept hearing, without that sort of pressure of girls being around, particularly in that this sort of middle adolescent years, sort of 14 to 17. And I think it just gives them, and the same with the emotional literacy, which is so important at the moment. And I think it just gives boys that freedom to explore those with the role. And to answer your question directly, how do they do that? It's just through having role models all around. And that comes male and female role models, but that's sports coaches, it's their drama, the people directing their drama plays, as well as their classroom teachers, as well as many support staff teaching. I think independent schools have a lot of non-teaching staff who are a fundamental part of the school. And it's so important, I think, for boys to learn to respect everybody and to work with everybody, men and women.
So, obviously there are very many arenas, and you both talk about a very broad curriculum. Holistic education was used as well as a phrase. So there's the drama, there's the art, there's the sport, there's the classroom. Can you honestly say that having no girls in those various different spaces is a good thing for boys in their teenage years? And if so, why? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? Caroline, can I start with you?
Okay, so I think to start about, is it only boys, is that always a good thing? I would say no. I think it's really important that boys' schools, and if you're, as parents, if you were choosing a boys' school, I think a really good question to ask would what would you do to work with other girls' schools and to make sure that they're meeting them, not just for the kind of the school disco on a Friday night, which is all slightly embarrassing, but actually working with them as intellectual equals. So one of the things that we do at St Paul's is that in every single year we have a commitment with the girls' school that they will do projects together, sort of entrepreneurship projects or sustainability or whatever. So it's actually they're working with them, not just, as I say, the school disco. So I think that's the first thing. But in terms of, because we are predominantly in the day, like St James's, just boys, I think from my experience, and I've only ever taught at boys' schools, I taught at Dulwich College and at St Paul's, I think what I love about it is I think boys, they really value relationships. They really want the teacher to know them as a whole individual. So being able to say to them, how was your cricket match at the weekend, or how was the play you're in, or whatever. They value relational learning. I think a lot of research is showing that boys really value that. They want to be seen as a whole individual. I think there's also an element that they quite like competition. They like risk-taking. I don't know if, Rick, you'd enjoy with this. So, for example, I'm a politics A-level teacher, so at the end of my lesson, I'll always do a quick sort of 4 or 5 minute, we call it the weakest link, where they have to go around the classroom and, quick fire questions, and they love it when sort of someone, if they get all the way around the classroom without anyone breaking the link. So a bit of healthy dose of competition, and they love humour. I'm not saying that females don't love these things, but I think boys, they love humour in a classroom, and they love to know the purpose of why they're learning. They love purposeful learning, and they really respect people who've got mastery of their subject, or a sports coach or whatever. So I think all those things, research is showing boys really value those things, and I think because we've only got boys, we can really focus on that. But it's just a luxury of only having boys that you can focus on your target audience, as it were.
I can see how that would work very much in an academic environment. In the less academic intense environment of St James's, Rick, what is it that the boys are getting without having girls around that is going to really make them flourish?
I think we're a small school. We're only just over 300. I mean, so much of what we've heard this morning is exactly what we'll be doing too. But for me, it is about the interactions they have. We, as a school that prides ourselves on teaching boys to get in touch with their emotions through the power of meditation and mindfulness, that practice of stillness in a lot of different capacities, it manifests itself in really quite powerful ways. For example, we had a sports team who'd got through to the semi-final of a competition, and unprompted by their coach, they gathered together at half-time when they were a try or two down to try and get back into the game, and they practiced stillness and mindfulness, which was really powerful for those boys together to connect emotionally. They worked together and then to go on and win the game. And that was, for us, very, very meaningful. I think that they then get opportunities in lots of other activities with both the male and female role models to interact. I think, I teach English at the moment, and I was having a discussion with a Year 9 class about gender issues in an Inspector Calls. And I was able to do that in a very open, meaningful way, in a way that wouldn't have been any different if they'd been girls or boys there. They were able to talk, and they were able to actually talk openly, to acknowledge power structures, to talk in a way. And I was really impressed with the way they were able to engage with that, because we openly talk about that. We have a really strong head of PSHE who's a young woman. And I was talking to her about this actually as well. It's similar, just trying to chat to her before coming today to speak to you about what it's like in a boys' school. She's fantastic, but she talks to them about everything and anything, and they feel they can unburden themselves in a way that I think they would struggle with if there were girls there. They are able to talk, and they can be vulnerable in a way, and we encourage that they feel they can do that, and talk about very challenging issues with her in front of other boys, and not feel that they would need to hold something back, which I have seen in some co-ed environments when I've been teaching.
So there are an increasing number of single-sex boys' schools, particularly, going co-ed, and the news broke, and I don't know how many parents are aware of this, that King's College School, which is one of the most academic schools in London, is following Westminster and taking girls all the way through the school, right from the junior school upwards. So, and that was a big news breaking. We knew about Winchester College not long ago, again, one of the oldest all-boys boarding schools in the country. Interesting that seems to be the trend. It's the boys' schools that are choosing to go co-ed rather than the single-sex schools. Could this ever happen at St Paul's, Caroline?
So not in the foreseeable future. We are fully committed to being all boys. I think I was thinking about this when I was thinking about the trend of why some schools have done this. And as far as I can make out, the majority of schools that are doing this, going co-ed, are ones that don't have a partner girls' school. So I think with Westminster and KCS, I can understand their rationale for why they've chosen to do it. We're both very lucky. And if you look at the schools around the country that have stayed single-sex, it's because they have a partner girls' school. So going back to my earlier point, we believe that we have the best of both worlds. I can understand why KCS and Westminster have taken that choice, because they don't have that counterpart of a girls' school. So no, at the moment, St Paul's is firmly boys, and unashamedly, proudly of being all boys.
So I just feel like everyone is itching to ask, well, I'm certainly itching to ask about toxic masculinity. It's absolutely the concern of pretty much all parents of teenagers, whether it be boys or girls. How does that play out in how you're teaching these boys in their single-sex environment, what they're looking at online, how they're regarding the opposite sex? Even as a female teacher, are you very conscious of how they may be perceiving you, for example, Caroline?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and one that I've often reflected on. And we do actually have, and it's really important, like in all walks of life, to have not support groups, that's the wrong word, but sort of groups where you get together. So female teachers or all female staff do get together and talk about anything that we think. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. I personally have never received any misogynistic behaviour, and I think I would be very quick to call it out. So I think we would be naive to say that that there wasn't any toxic masculinity, and I think you just have to name it and call it out. And I think boys' schools are probably being helped by society at the moment in that they will be receiving these messages hopefully from home, and their parents will from their workplaces. So I don't think we're doing this in isolation, but it's just a case of explicitly talking about it, like Rick was saying, through formal PSHE lessons, through everything, all your co-curricular activities, all the time.
Yes, Rick, what would you like to add?
I absolutely agree with everything said there. I think it's important also to say that the toxic masculinity in its various forms is not, it's not only going to manifest itself in independent boys' schools. I've worked in co-ed schools and dealt with instances there of challenging behaviour. So I would certainly counter that by saying it's about those open conversations. And I do genuinely think about, obviously, I know it's a different country, but my experience of being at an all-boys school in South Africa, and the schools are quite similar in many ways to UK schools. It was a different world in the 1980s. As a boy, I certainly wouldn't have spoken about my emotions and would have found that quite difficult. Things have moved on immeasurably. I cannot stress that enough, that we are open, we talk to the boys, we encourage them to talk. We are open about the fact that we have a fantastic school counsellor. We offer emotional literacy support for boys. It's common currency amongst the boys that it's there, it's available. And when it comes to the toxic masculinity, again, my head of PSHE has been doing a fantastic job on that. And because we're a small school, she teaches all the boys. So there's a single person who is managing that, and then talking to the pastoral staff about the messages going out there. We've had some excellent speakers who come in and talk about this exact matter. And so we're consciously talking to the boys, and of course talking to parents about what they can do to support us in managing what the boys are seeing online and how we can navigate this. This is a difficult territory, but we've got to be open about it and confront these issues. And again, it's as we heard recently with Gareth Southgate, it's about providing wonderful, positive role models for young men. And I'm proud of the fact that we do that at our school. I know that St. Paul's will do exactly the same. We've got these wonderful teachers, male and female, who embody the values that we would want, and the boys are looking up to them all the time.
Do you mind if I just add to that? I've actually, interestingly, noticed a difference even in the last 5 years. So, we, like most schools, will have a school counselling service. And I remember I used to be what we call an undermaster, which is like a head of house. And I remember 5 or 6 years ago saying to the boys, do you want to go and have a chat with the school counsellor about this? And they're always a bit like, ooh, we're not sure. A little bit like neurodiversity, actually, when you sort of broach it with parents. It's a bit like, oh, I don't want my kid labelled, blah, blah, blah. The last 5 years, I've seen such a difference, to the point that one of my A-level boys a couple of weeks ago said, oh, miss, I'm really getting nervous before my sort of test essays. I'm going to go and speak to the school counsellor about it, proactively. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. So I think everyone's invited. I think the Me Too movement, openly talking about neurodiversity, the last 5 years, society has just made huge leaps forward, which is just fantastic.
Thank you. I think this is a good moment to open up the floor for questions. There are 3 at the front here. Have you got the roving mic? Thank you. Or you can use mine. Why don't you use mine?
Just adding to that, are you changing your policy about the phones in schools and how it is evolving?
Yes, very important question. Are you changing your policy, Rick, about mobile phones?
It's a good question. And this would apply obviously to co-ed and single-sex schools. We, as a day school, and St. Paul's will be in a similar position. Lots of our boys travel in by public transport, so they have phones for that purpose. They're not supposed to be out at school from year 7 to 11, and if they are, they get confiscated. We're exploring other options, and whether we have introduced the Yonder pouch, which I know has been introduced in a lot of schools. Sixth form, we trust they need to be preparing for university, so we trust them with their devices to manage that themselves. But 7 to 11, we don't. And again, we monitor that very closely. I think it's helped that we're a small school. We can keep an eye on it, but it's a constant worry and constant issue for us to monitor.
Can I just add to your question? Are you noticing much more concern amongst your parents about their children having phones in school?
I wouldn't say much more, but it's certainly it's a topic of conversation. We know that parents would willingly take their phones away, please. And we understand that. We do understand that. Our boys have devices anyway. They have iPads, so there's no need for them to have anything else in school. But they do need them when they're travelling, and we understand that. It's about how we manage that. Caroline, I know strides have been made by St Paul's. You under pouches?
Exactly. So obviously in the prep school we don't have them at all. And then recently we introduced yonder pouches in what we call our fourth form, so year 9, the first year of the senior school, which actually we were wondering how that would go down, and it's not been a bit of a non-issue really, so that's great. Similarly, they all have devices, so there's no real need for them to have a phone during the day. I think a lot of it is also helping parents, and I think schools have a part to play in that, and there was parental pressure, which I think is good, and that's how the independent sector works. So I think if schools can help parents by enforcing some rules, then that's a positive thing.
Can I just ask for a quick show of hands before the next question? How many parents would put their smartphone policy as a very high criteria for choosing a school? Could you just raise your hands if you'd put it very, very high on your list of criteria? It's almost, about a third, isn't it? Of the would you like to ask?
Hi, thank you very much. I was curious. I know you mentioned that you have an equivalent girls' school and you do some activities around sort of entrepreneurial projects and so on. I'm curious what you do, both of you, at your schools in terms of building core skills and relationship skills, so that boys come out of boys' schools with a really good sense of what a healthy relationship looks like, what communication with females looks like if they don't have sisters of their own or whatever. I'm just curious about what that piece of education looks like at an all-boys school.
Yes. Do you want to go first, Caroline?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think we have timetabled PSHE lessons, and a core part of that in every single year. I think a really good PSHE education will spiral, so you're constantly revisiting topics all the years at a more sophisticated level and age-appropriate level. So relationships and sex education and issues like consent. I know, talking to our head of PSHE, similarly with Rick, put a lot of thought into how, because you say to boys, you must make sure you have consent. Well, what does consent look like? So we've actually had, actual sort of lessons on what the words might be, what the sort of body language might be, and when you have to stop. When a lady might be like, that actually I'm not okay with this anymore. So I think it is just explicitly teaching it, and then also, and this goes back to the thing about the creatives and why they're so important, is that even in things like drama lessons, teaching about body language, teaching about voice projection, all those kind of things, even if you're not going to go and be a budding actor, they're really important skills for all walks of life, for how you present yourselves and just being aware of your body language. And I do believe strongly that you can teach emotional intelligence. You can teach people. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I would support that. I would say that I don't. Certainly, the co-ed schools I've worked in, I don't recall us ever explicitly teaching relationships between boys and girls. It was about, in the end, and I think when I think now what we do as a boys' school, we return to our core values and what we see as important as a school. It's absolutely part of our PSHE program, and relationships and sex education is a really, really fundamental part of that. But we talk a lot about, one of our founding principles is the philosophy of unity for us, that we are all one. So for us, it's about that mutual respect for everyone, different cultures, and again, that's men, women, whoever you deal with. And we return to that a lot. So a lot of it is about our values as a school, how we would want a mutually respectful relationship to blossom and flourish, male, female, whatever that is. It's those fundamental principles are the same.
Yes. Have you got any more questions further? I was favouring the people next to me, but maybe there's some more questions at the back. Nothing? Good, okay.
Do you mind if I just... Sorry,
Yes.
Oh, hello, hi. So my question, probably for Caroline, as a highly academically selective school like St. Paul, if for a student, if he's really strong in maths, but maybe average in English, would that be considered as an advantage or disadvantage? So my question is, like, in your admission process, what skills or aspects that you value the most?
Okay, slightly going off the topic, but I'll cover it quickly. We place emphasis on everything. So our entrance procedure will have a maths exam and an English exam, and then for the final stage it's interview based, and there we're not only looking at passion for learning, but we also are looking at character education. One of my favourite questions, which I now won't be able to ask again because I'm going to publicly say it, is what makes you laugh? What do you do to relax? What makes you happy? Just getting them to think, because these are probably highly intelligent boys who maybe go on to have highly pressurised careers. They need to know how to de-stress, how to switch off, how to look after their mental well-being, and also character education. And then also, what do they like doing outside of the classroom? We're not looking for robots, it's boring. So that's quickly what I was going to say, if you don't mind me quickly saying, is for all of you, obviously it's parental decision whether you want to go for a boys' school or a co-ed school, and your child may have a strong preference for one. But if you do choose a co-ed school, if I could just ask that at the open days or whatever, that you just say to them, what are you doing for boys? I think it's really important that as a society we raise this awareness that boys have been maybe a little bit left behind in the last 10 years. So please, you have the power. Do say to the head teacher or the head of admissions or whatever, what do you do for your boys? Of those results of your A-level, of your Oxbridge, of your Ivy League, whatever, what percentage are the boys? So just drill down a little bit, and then we can all put pressure and help raise the standard for boys as well.
Can I come in on that?
You agree with that? I was going to say there's a big contrast between a sort of very academic boys' school and a more holistic education at St James's. And you touched on this, Caroline, interestingly, even though your boys are very able, that there's a vulnerability amongst boys at the moment. And obviously that's complex because obviously boys have had it all for a long time, and how do you handle that, Rick, with your particular kind of cohort?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what Caroline said there, and it's about providing that balance. I think there has been a shift in the last few years, and absolutely that there have been some fundamental changes in society that needed to happen. But I share some concerns about boys, and there's enough data out there to suggest certainly in some sections of society boys are being left behind for various reasons, and that's why for me it's really important to be able to help those boys flourish. An area where I see real advantages for boys is certainly those middle teenage years. And it's probably less pronounced at sixth form and maybe less pronounced at year 7. But the sort of year 8, 9, 10 and shading into year 11, certainly my experience in co-ed schools is that girls advance very quickly, and boys struggle. They do struggle, and the benefit of them all being together is that we can work with them at their own pace, and often boys come through a bit later than girls, and we often see that certainly in the GCSE years, but we can manage that quite well. We've done something a little bit different with our curriculum, where we've got what we now have as a 3-year GCSE program. They choose a year earlier, they start in year 9. For our boys that works well. It gives them a longer run-in for the GCSEs, and rather than a pressured often 2-year focus, but that works for our cohort. I think my final point, if I can, and I'm sure that Caroline will agree, is it's really about knowing your son and knowing what would work for him. I'm not a complete zealot for all boys schools sitting here, because my daughter is at a co-ed boarding school. It's right for her. My son is at a single-sex school because it's right for him and he will flourish. So you will know your child and you will know what's right. And I would say the key thing to do is come and look at these schools, narrow a few down and go and see whether you think your son will flourish at that particular kind of school. And absolutely ask those questions about those schools. What are you doing for their emotional life and protecting them and helping them flourish in various ways? That's absolutely crucial.
Thank you. Yes, a question at the front.
Actually, I've changed my question, because you answered already in your previous answer. But I wanted to ask you, I've got 2 boys reception in year 2, and I've heard people say that before about, what's right for your child. Have you got any advice for kind of how can you tell? I've got 2 boys. I mean, obviously we have friends with daughters. They're actually at a pre-prep, which is, it has now gone co-ed, but only recently. So there are a lot more boys, and my year 2 boy, it's all boys in his year. So I mean, I don't know, is it suddenly going to come like a vision, or how would I know? And also the secondary question, when you're looking at schools, do you think it's a good idea to take your child with you, or how do you expose them to the different environments? Any advice for a parent of young boys?
That's a very good question. Yes, please, I'd like to know the answer to that.
Do you want to start?
Well, if I start with the second one, I would definitely bring your child. I mean, we have a big open day, Saturday the 6th of September, if anyone's interested, is our big open day, and that's geared towards children. So we have like quizzes and things like that. So I think don't drag your child to a thing where they're just going to have to sit there for an hour listening to speeches. That's unfair on the child. But I think most schools nowadays, particularly the independent sector, will have an interactive, fun day that you can go to. And the amount of boys I've heard say, it was at the open day, it just felt right. I think we all know that feeling when you just go somewhere and you're like, this is where I want to be. So and then gosh, on your first question, how do you know at reception? That's very hard. I might pass on to you, Rick. Well, give me some thinking time on that one.
Or from year 3.
I think it starts to become a bit clearer once they get to 3 and 4. I think at that age, absolutely, I would have struggled to have known at that point too. But I think once they get closer to the age of 10, 9, 10, that you start to see. But I think it's about being open and exploring and seeing what's right. And sometimes it's about the particular school and the atmosphere and whether it works. Now, unless you feel really strongly they should be in co-ed, then it's worth exploring and saying, well, I like this ethos, I like what this school stands for, I think my boy could thrive. And I think the key thing about modern boys' schools is we're not in that word monastic. We don't exist in isolation. And particularly in London, the massive benefit is you've got the richness of London on your doorstep. And that for me is, for those boys, they've got all those opportunities. We're fortunate to have girls' schools that we can connect with. But even if it's a school that doesn't have that, there are other opportunities to connect.
Yeah, it's given me some thinking time. Thank you, Rick. I totally agree with that. I don't think unless you're resolute, I definitely want single sex or I definitely want co-ed. I would probably wouldn't make that your first thing. I would just go and have a look at all of them and choose it on other things, on the ethos of the school, because like Rick said, we've all got connections with girls' schools. And I think if you had a really, really sporty boy who loved, I don't know, rugby or something like that, you might want to choose a boys' school that's got huge amounts of playing fields, because literally just from the fact that we only have to think about boys, we have the luxury of amazing sports coaches, etc., etc. So maybe if you had a really, really sporty boy who loved running around and wanted access to loads of amounts of sports coaches and fields.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, we place a lot of emphasis on outdoor education. We have extensive trips, DFE, cadets, and those things. Those certainly appeal to boys. I'm not saying girls don't enjoy that too, but for our boys, they get a huge amount of that. And playing fields, literally, they run out the main entrance, and here they are on their playing fields, and that's really important for them too.
Thank you for that question. Excellent question. I think it's not just playing fields, though. It's the strength in depth. You need enough boys to field 2 teams to have a good match. So thank you so much, Caroline and Rick. That was really, really illuminating for all of us. It's an age-old topic, but it never ceases to be interesting with all the various pressures that arise that we're not expecting. So thank you all for participating. And I think the next talk in here is going to be about choosing schools beyond London. So if London's all just a bit too competitive and a bit too much, there are schools that are accessible beyond London, and there are other options. So thank you all, and thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.